Hi, I'm Tom Lippincott, and this series of classes is called Modern Jazz Guitar. In the class today, we're going to be exploring the history and origins of the modern jazz guitar style, along with some ideas about technique. The modern jazz guitar style that I'm talking about could best be exemplified by such players as Kurt Rosenwinkel, Ben Monder, Jonathan Kreisberg, Lage Lund, Gilad Hexelman, Adam Rogers, a lot of the players that are kind of on the New York scene in the early 2000s. And not that we're going to be exclusively studying specific player styles the whole time, although we will get into that a little bit. But this class is really designed for the intermediate to advanced level guitarist that already has a lot of the traditional jazz guitar vocabulary under their fingers and in their ears, and isn't quite sure how to go about getting a little bit more of that modern sound into their playing. Maybe you've heard some of these players, or some of the players that play other instruments that play in that more modern style, and have wondered what is it that they're doing differently than what I'm doing that gets that modern sound. So we're going to be getting in depth into studying the details of single note lines, ideas for generating new vocabulary to get a more of that modern sound, also chord voicings and comping ideas, and then also specifically ideas to do with rhythm. For anyone who has not seen one of my classes before, just to explain this guitar so no one gets confused about the tuning, as you can see it's an 8-string guitar, but the middle 6 strings are the regular 6 strings of a 6-string guitar, E, A, D, G, B, E, right, from 6th to 1st string. I have a high A string up here beside the high E string, and then a low B string down here on the bottom range, but everything in the middle is normal 6-string guitar. Almost all of the modern well-known players from Pat Metheny and Schofield and Bill Frisell on up through Ben Monder and Kurt Rosenwinkel acknowledge Jim Hall's towering influence, and it's almost like they wouldn't be who they are if it wasn't for Jim Hall. And he definitely had this really unique way of combining the traditional with the modern. And you can definitely hear in this recorded example that we're going to check out both things going on at the same time. This is his single note solo from My Funny Valentine, from his album, one of the duo albums he did with Bill Evans, I believe is Undercurrent. And they play the tune at a pretty quick clip, kind of a medium up tempo, which is kind of unusual for My Funny Valentine. Usually played as a ballad. And you can kind of hear a very similar approach to 8th note lines that we heard in Charlie Christian, with that very hard driving swing, and you can tell it's swinging, but it's not. It doesn't have quite that same bouncy triplet feel that the older style swing musicians had. It definitely has that more updated kind of thing, but his tone, his swing feel, and his phrasing is very much Charlie Christian, and yet he's doing some stuff that Charlie Christian definitely wouldn't have done. First of all, he is building off of a very simple kind of idea, which also could be seen to come from his background as a classical composer. He's starting off with this rhythmic motif, starts off with this idea, and then quickly changes to just kind of a 3-note figure, this rhythm, da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And then he kind of moves that around. He's established two things, a rhythm and a set of intervals. In this case, very simple, just a third. 2 notes a third apart. And he kind of keeps that, both of those thematic elements throughout most of the rest of this phrase. The interesting thing, however, is how he develops that. First of all, he's also doing a very modernistic thing here in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th bars of his solo. He's taking this rhythmic figure. If I just played that over and over again, it gives you the sense that we're in 3/4 time. Ba-da-ba, ba-da-da-ba, ba-da-da-ba, right? It's easy to count to 3 with that. However, they're in 4/4 time, so he's superimposing the 3/4 time over that. And as we'll see in the class on rhythm, that's a real common thing for modern players to do. There's a lot of sophisticated polyrhythmic idea in sort of the modern approach. 1, 2, 3, 4. Example we have from Bill Frisell is a single note solo. This is on the Bill Evans tune, Very Early. Okay, now I want to point out a couple of points about this solo before we check it out. If you look here at the top of page 14, first of all, if you're at all familiar with Bill Frisell, you know that he doesn't play a whole lot of notes. He's not like a real chops monster kind of player. Tends to leave a lot of space. Definitely got that from Jim Hall. Plus just maybe his, sort of his nature. And you can definitely hear that in this solo. There's plenty of space left, and he's not playing a whole lot of kind of fast licks, but he does sort of put every note right in the right place, right where it needs to be. The other thing is his use of motifs, much like what Jim Hall did also. We see at the very beginning of the solo, he gives us this, and then it repeats the same thing, and then again. And then one other thing that you'll see him do is quoting the melody in the solo. Bill Frisell also, I have a feeling, tends to look to the melody of a song as much as the chord changes for his inspiration for, thematic material. And here at the beginning of the second A section, down in the third line, he's got that's almost an exact quote of the melody. So he's definitely making a strong allusion to the melody there. And then on top of all that, like John Scofield, but in a slightly different way, maybe a little more quirky and unusual, he will like to mix full chords with little bits and pieces of chords. A good example here is the fourth line down, this D major 7 chord. He plays a C sharp and then immediately a D natural underneath it. So he's just got those two notes, that pungent major 7th interval. It's almost kind of like that's all you need. It's almost a little more colorful than hearing, the whole chord. And then right after that, fourths. And then here, this minor second, just the root and the flat 9 of the B7, really dissonant, more dissonant than the whole chord could be again. And then back to fourths. So a very interesting juxtaposition of these very pungent double stops with full kind of open sounding fourths, and he definitely likes to mix that up that way. Okay, now here is the close-up of that. Bill Frisell, single note phrase on Very Early. 1, 2, 3. chord phrase from Bill Frisell. This is his intro to and first A section of the standard The Days of Wine and Roses. This is actually not from a record, but from a TV show that he played on years ago called The Guitar Show, a locally produced TV show up in New York. And there's, as of 2011, there's a YouTube clip that you can see of this performance. And there's definitely a lot of stuff going on here that I think is very typical of Bill Frisell. This very textural, spacious kind of sound that he gets, both with his choice of notes and the way he sustains things, and also his use of effects. He's using a volume pedal to get the volume swells. And then he also has a tendency to bend his neck to get some pitch variation. That kind of sound. And you mix that in with a little bit of echo. And it creates this kind of almost like a chorus sound, because you're hearing the echoed sound right after the guitar sound, and because I'm varying the pitch a little bit and mixing it with the delayed sound, they're slightly out of tune with each other, and it creates this kind of natural chorusing effect, but it's not quite as mechanical sounding as a chorus pedal would get. Okay, and then you'll see more of his use of unusual little bits and pieces of chords. And then he gets this E flat 7. I'm down here on the second line, just 2 notes. And then this real interesting D7 flat 9. Real unusual note choices there. And then he's got the minor seconds in there. Very interesting, contrapuntal ideas and counterpoint and small bits and pieces of chords all mixed together to get that real unique Bill Frisell kind of sound. And here's me playing this example, and I went ahead and took the liberty of finishing it out, the rest of the melody, improvising my own version of it. Bill Frisell, chord phrase on The Days of Wine and Roses. Per string, A minor, C major pentatonic scale. This is just the most straightforward scale everybody knows, but the idea here is 2 notes per string. If I'm doing alternate picking, it's going to be down, up, or I also want to work on it doing up, down. And for me, I do play with a pick sum, and I've noticed that when I'm doing 2 notes per string, it's actually easier for me if I start with an upstroke if I'm playing a run like this, than if I start with the downstroke. I think the string crossing is just easier that way. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That works for me anyway. Okay, here's that in close up. Example 2, 2 notes per string, A minor, C major, pentatonic scale. First, starting with downstrokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. same thing, but starting with an upstroke. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next is example 2A, 2 notes per string, C major scale. This is a little bit of a different concept. Most 2 note per string kind of shapes tend to be, pentatonic or things with bigger leaps. This idea is taking a major scale but using the 2 notes per string idea. So it's best explained just by showing you the close-up. Example 2A, 2 notes per string, C major scale. First starting with the downstroke. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now starting with an upstroke. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that does it for Modern Jazz Guitar Part 1. I hope you'll join me for Modern Jazz Guitar Part 2, where we'll be exploring in depth single note lines and generating ideas for a more updated sound.